as if it were a financial transaction. With all the legal scrutiny behind financial transactions, we could apply the same for CDR or whatever carbon project. So that put us again in a good position to be first out, even already five years ago.
Thanks, Misha, for sharing the 4 criteria. If you don't mind just going back to the integrity piece, because that is, as one of the questions is really asking, how exactly does MRV affect your decision and potentially related to the integrity criteria?
Yeah, the answer was a bit hidden in my long speech. We started by applying our internal standard, by applying our internal checks. And the first controversies were hitting us, where we said, well, you have sourced in this project, there is some problems with human rights, didn't you check? And our internal risk managers come back and say, well, where is the due diligence that you did? And then we say, well, we use this standard because it's the best standard out there. And we have to rely on their judgment, on their due diligence, so that we don't have to do that with each and every project. That would be completely out. So in this world where you have the media coming after you, and I don't have to talk about the frenzy, every outlet found another scandal about some tiny project rather than talking about big oil and gas mergers. In this world, we really had to go an extra level, and we went to a credit rating agency, and we pay now to get this additional judgment of the quality of a credit, and an independent MRV that you can point to is this top layer that protects us. So it's a cover my peep extra layer of safety that we really rely upon right now. Otherwise, we would get many of our actions and many of purchases blocked. So we even do that with projects. We are in a buyer's club, for example, and we even do it with projects that are proposed in that buyer's club, where you have an intermediary creating the project pipeline and not yourself going out to look for good projects, or not you on a secondary market just buying what the broker suggests. But also in this buyer's club, we have these extra eyes on the projects just to avoid to do something wrong.
Yeah, thank you, Misha. So for those of you who asked, clearly MRV is critical in terms of providing transparency on the credit quality, which is essential for both managing the financial risk and reputational risk, as Misha noted. With that, actually moving on to the supply side. So another question that came through was really asking specifically what steps Duncan and Diego, you as CDR suppliers, are taking when selecting an MRV. What are some of the key benefits? What are your considerations? So Duncan, let's start with you and then go to Diego.
Yeah. So in selecting, or at least the process that we went through internally in selecting our MRV provider, first of all, the thing we wanted to do is first understand, or at least we articulated why we wanted to do this externally. It's possible, as you mentioned, Laila, to do this internally and do the MRV supplier, make the MRV supplier led. So for us, the reason was mostly because we wanted to make our carbon removal practical for the buyer. Many of the buyers are not seated here in Kenya. They can't easily visit us. And so we had the buyer in mind when we were making this choice at the very start. And so if our objective was, and our vision for this is, that if Misha wants to buy a credit from Octavia that's being originated in Kenya, he can easily trace it right from the CO2 molecule being pulled from the air to where it's going to be stored. So that was the first reason, or at least that we had. And we also wanted to remove that complexity and make it easier for buyers who may not be as familiar with dark as most of the sophisticated buyers tend to be. So starting with that, then we went through the process of now deciding how we're going to do this with a third party and what are some of the criteria we look for. It's no secret we are working on this with Carbon Future, and the reason for this is also Carbon Future has that experience with buyers. And at the time, we wanted people who can also understand, because Carbon Future has a brokerage arm, understand what buyers need and what type of product will make this easier for us to sell the credits into the market and drive that highest level of quality and trust. So those were some of the criteria that we looked at, and we also wanted, as a hardware company, we wanted people with very good experience on the software side, and to make this as easy as possible for anyone to really trace those CO2 molecules all the way to the storage location, and then even the monitoring that happens thereafter. It's still a work in progress, and it's something that we are developing together, but that's how we thought about it when we made this choice.
Great, thanks so much, Duncan. So Diego, Duncan just mentioned a couple of things. One is having this kind of comprehensive data trail, as Duncan noted, from the molecule all the way to the credit. And then also knowing what buyers care about, so being able to access the market and signal that their credits are high quality. What would you add from Exormat's perspective? What criteria are you using to select an MRV?
So first of all, I think that you have to do a market research. So upon doing the market research, you should do, of course, everything, your search online, attend events, the conferences there are, get references from suppliers that are already on the market. And based on all your market research, you should find a MRV that suits your needs, that can attend your needs, which are going to be different from supplier to supplier, from different industries, whatever you're doing. In our case, we selected Carbon Future because it was a platform, the MRV process or digital MRV process, that was more reliable, that it was well known, that it had a good market reputation, that brought transparency into the process, and that we were able to integrate this on an efficient manner into our systems. We have built-in systems that control all our production, and we have been able to do an integration via API with the Carbon Future DMRV, so that we can add this extra layer of transparency and security to our customers, because in this market is something that's very highly valued, is that there is integrity, you show trustworthiness, and I think that that's the reason that you need to do all your research, and why we, at least as Exormat Green, believe that this should be done by an independent third party and not done in-house, so that you can bring this extra layer of transparency to the customer base, which at the end of the day is going to be buying your carbon credit, and there's a lot of trustworthiness on that.
Thanks, Diego. So you've highlighted transparency, and specifically for buyers, in order to access the kind of be able to actually sell your the credits coming out of your project, and also the convenience because of the digital integration. One of the things that you're touching on is actually part of the next question, which is, why is it important for MRV to be independent from suppliers? So you've touched on the transparency and just having an independent party do the data collection. And then I want to come to you, because there's also the second part of that question is like, why is it important for MRV to be independent from a standard?
Yes, very happy to answer that. So as Chief Operating Officer, it's my and my team's roles to make sure that the data we receive are being processed properly, and that we go through the entire certification process, which means we review data first, we then sort of make our first assessments, because the multitude of projects with the first submission of data would not pass an audit. So we need to make sure that we check the quality up front, that we send the data onwards to a verification validation body. We receive the data back and forth, and this process of just using and handling data is 95% of the time of the biggest teams within Puro, basically. And while we do and will continue to offer for really early stage projects no MRV, like submitting data to us without MRV tools, it is making it so much easier to handle data when it comes from a standardized and automatized partner or MRV provider. And we also asked ourselves the question, should we be offering that as a standard ourselves? But then this question arises of the conflict of interest. Is it us who set the rules, who issue credits? Is it then also us who should be collecting the data? And our decision was no, we should be the ones sort of going with an API into the systems of our suppliers, fetching data from there, harnessing and collecting them, and sort of processing the data that way. We believe that wherever it's efficient, we don't add cost, because obviously cost is always a factor. As long as we can stay efficient, we very much welcome a new pair of eyes that goes into there, that brings in new expertise that we might not have, because there's a plethora of methodologies, a plethora of different types of carbon removal. So we want to make sure that we allow, in an ecosystem market approach, for knowledge to be grown as quickly as possible. And if there are experts that are really good in supporting suppliers with getting data to us, while that does not increase cost, but rather increase the efficiency, that is something we very much want to support with. That is why we think that in future, MRV will play a bigger role, and it's independent MRV that it needs to be. So we don't think that, so probably the other way around, we think there would be a conflict of interest if we were the only ones to harness the data directly from our suppliers.
Thanks, Benno. So I think what's important to just put a fine point on is distributor accountability matters for scaling of this market as the market matures, and also some of this efficiency and data being key to, again, the scalability of the market. What I want to come back to the demand side of the market, Misha, with a question for you. So this participant who pre-submitted, actually, the question states that there are only a few actual CDR buyers today. And we know that from CDR.FYI, I think there were like 188 buyers in 2023, and only 14 bought over 10,000 tons. And the note here is that this actually could slow down adoption of MRV systems. Misha, the question for you is, what could encourage more companies to invest in CDR?
It's a $100 million question, right? And we are increasingly getting nervous about this monopsony, that the same 5 buyers are doing these purchases and try to outcompete themselves with slightly bigger purchases the next year. What this does is it scares off the 5,000 that should follow. While it looks like everybody's super helpful in providing advice, it's highly unlikely that everybody can follow a Swiss Re approach or a Microsoft approach or a Stripe or Shopify approach, right? Now, why is nobody buying this? The answer is the V in VCM, because it's voluntary. Who is incentivizing a private sector player to basically dedicate climate finance to begin with, and dedicated climate finance to negative emissions? We have missed the chance with the one and only international standard setter that sets climate target standards for all sectors, which is SBTi by now. We've also missed earlier the chance to have this being a UN organization and not an NGO. It would have saved us also a bit of problems. We don't really see regulators picking that up so much. I come from Switzerland, and there is vague language. We have a net zero law, actually, so bigger corporates have to be net zero by 2050. And there is an idea on how much removals that will require, but again, not for financial sector players, how much financial flows you should dedicate, etc., etc. The role of government will at some point take over the V, so it's no longer voluntary, but it will be a compliance question in order to demonstrate in your climate transition plan what you are about to undertake to get to the net zero. So there I'm hopeful, and there are people who are thinking, are there other ways to accelerate the role of government? Of course, through government procurement. That would help greatly, but also maybe through some incentivization schemes, not just throwing money at climate solution providers, but also through offering